Hello YouTube and welcome back to another video. Today we have part 3 of my top 100 college basketball players since the year 2000. This is the final part of the series. At number 24 we have Frank Kaminsky III, a guy who led Wisconsin to the national championship versus Duke in I believe 2015. He was a guy who was there 2 years in a row making a big impact, and he's been in the league not anymore, but he was there in the NBA for about a decade and just contributed as a solid 5. At number 23, we have Trey Burke, a guy who was an electrifying point guard at Michigan who could score the ball from everywhere and ended up getting drafted in the lottery to the Jazz and ended up playing about 8 years in the NBA. At number 22, we have Shabazz Napier, a guy who played at UConn on, I believe he was on that number 7 seeded UConn team that made the national championship. He's a pretty good player and ended up playing about 8-9 years in the NBA. At number 21, we have Juan Dixon, a guy that played in the early 2000s for Maryland and was on that Maryland national championship team. He was the heart and soul of that team, starting point guard, ended up playing a few seasons with the Washington Wizards. At number 20, we have Doug McDermott, National Player of the Year in the NCAA. He is nicknamed Dougie McBuckets for a reason. He can score, he can shoot, he can do just about everything to impact the game offensively. He's just not a great defender. He's still in the NBA, currently playing for the Kings, and he's been in the league for about 15 years. At number 19, we have Dwayne Wade, a guy that made the NBA Finals, or the college basketball championship game, with Marquette. He won a bunch of NBA championships, I think about 3 or 4, including leading the Heat as the number 1 option to the finals and winning it over Dirk and the Mavs in 2006. He was a great player in college. At number 18, we have J.J. Redick, a guy who at Duke was a great player. He wasn't only a shooter, he was actually one of the best scorers in all of college basketball. He's the current Lakers coach, and he played about 20 years in the NBA. At number 17, we have Trae Young, another guy from Oklahoma who was one of the best shooters and most electrifying scorers in college basketball. Look up Trae Young 2018 NCAA tournament highlights, and you will 100% be impressed if you've never watched it before, because he is one of the best scorers we've ever seen at the college basketball level, and now he's a multi-time All-Star playing for the Hawks. At number 16, we have Michael Beasley from Kansas State, a one-and-done guy from Washington, D.C., who ended up averaging like 28 and 10 as a freshman at KSU, and then going 2nd overall to the Miami Heat in the NBA draft. He wasn't great in the NBA, but was one of the best scorers in the league, and you could always count on him to get a bucket, and he played 11 years, I believe. At number 15, we have Emeka Okafor, a guy who was an NBA Rookie of the Year from UConn, drafted 2nd overall to the Hornets in 2004. He was just a solid big man for about 15 years, but he actually did get worse throughout the years. He was best as a rookie. At 14, we have Jay Williams, a guy who played for Duke in the early 2000s. He was a pretty good point guard at Duke. Ended up going 2nd overall to the Bulls in, I believe, the 2000 draft, or maybe it was 2001. But he did get a motorcycle accident a couple games into his NBA career and was out for the rest of his career. At number 13, we have another former National Player of the Year, Jalen Brunson, who played at Villanova. He led them to the national championship game a few years ago. It actually was the number 1 scorer when they won, I believe, and ended up going in the 2nd round to the Mavericks in 2018 and is now one of the best point guards in the league. At number 12, we have Greg Oden from Ohio State, a 2007 draft pick. He was a bully ball center, back to the basket type of guy who went number 1 overall to the Trailblazers, just didn't stay healthy in the league because of knee injuries. At number 11, we have one of the greatest players in college basketball history, Adam Morrison. At Gonzaga in 2006, Morrison was putting up almost 30 points a game, which is some of the best numbers we've ever seen in college basketball, and he just didn't translate well to the NBA. Ended up going to the Bobcats in the top 10 and only played 4 seasons in the NBA before tearing his ACL and having to retire. At number 10, we have Kevin Durant, a guy that played for the University of Texas and was just as good of a scorer, if not better, against college competition in 2007. Ended up going 2nd overall, 1 pick behind Greg Oden, who we just did talk about. He's a NBA champion with the Warriors and one of the top 20 players of all time. At number 9, we have Stephen Curry, a guy who led Davidson College on one of the best runs we have ever seen in the NCAA tournament for a really small mid-major school like that. Like, we've seen Gonzaga and all these schools go on tournament runs, but Davidson is a team that people never had heard of before Steph Curry went there. He's obviously a top 10 NBA player of all time. Everyone knows who Steph Curry is. At number 8, we have another former National Player of the Year, Tyler Hansbrough, who played for the University of North Carolina. He was one of the best scorers at the power forward position we've seen in college basketball history. And he ended up playing for the Charlotte Bobcats and the Indiana Pacers and the Toronto Raptors before leaving the NBA. At number 7, we have Blake Griffin from the University of Oklahoma. Ended up going first overall in 2009, missed his whole rookie season, and ended up playing about a decade more in the league. He's a really solid power forward. He always has been, just able to get buckets, and he's also just a great athlete. At number 6, we have Jimmer Fredette, one of the best players I've ever seen play with my own two eyes when he was at college. He could hit every shot he took. He was insane basketball player. If you've never watched him, go look up Jimmer Fredette highlights at BYU. He ended up going 11th overall to the Sacramento Kings and playing about 6 years in the league. At number 5, we have another National Player of the Year, Zion Williamson, on one of the greatest college basketball teams of all time. Him and Duke made it to the Elite Eight, but did lose to Cassius Winston and Michigan State. For Zion and the Blue Devils, they were a pretty good team, and he was the most electrifying player in college sports. And he ended up going first overall to the Pelicans and obviously still is in the league. At number 4, we have Kemba Walker. He is another guy who was just great to watch in college. At UConn, he was nicknamed Cardiac Kimba because he made so many great plays and buzzer beaters and game winners and clutch plays. Just look up his UConn highlights and you'll understand what I'm talking about. Multi-time All-Star with the Hornets. Kind of got his career wasted playing there, though. At number 3, we have Carmelo Anthony, a guy that led Syracuse to the national championship in 2003 and ended up being a top 5 draft pick to the Nuggets and playing about 20 years in the league and being top, I think, 15 in the scoring in NBA history. At number 2, we have Zach Edey, a 2-time National Player of the Year. I think he's the first guy that ever did that since Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He averaged like 25 and 15 and 5 blocks for his college career. 7'5", just giant. He was a first-round pick in this year's draft, 9th overall to the Grizzlies, and that's where he's playing right now. And at number 1, we have Anthony Davis, 7-foot center who played for Kentucky in 2012, ended up going first overall to the Pelicans. He led them to the national championship with Patrick Patterson in them, and he is my number 1 player in college basketball since 2000. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe.